President Ibrahim Traoré sat in the back of his official vehicle as it sped through the quiet streets of the capital. His mind wasn't on the upcoming meetings or policy decisions. Instead, a letter he had received 3 days ago occupied his thoughts. The handwritten pages from a woman named Fatima Diallo had kept him awake for nights. "There's been a mistake, Mr. President," she had written. "My husband Hassan has spent 7 years in Mako prison for a crime he didn't commit." The president had read hundreds of such pleas during his time in office. Most were passed to advisors or the Justice Ministry. But something about this one, the detailed evidence, the names of witnesses never interviewed, the passionate certainty had gripped him. "We're almost there, Mr. President," his security chief announced, interrupting his thoughts. The convoy slowed as they approached Mako prison, a grim concrete structure on the outskirts of the city. President Traoré had informed only his closest security team about this visit. Not even the prison warden knew he was coming. "Remember, sir, we have 20 minutes before your absence will be noticed," his chief of staff whispered beside him. The president nodded. 20 minutes might be enough to find the truth. When the vehicle stopped at the prison entrance, guards scrambled to attention. The warden, hastily adjusting his uniform, rushed out to meet them. "Mr. President, this is unexpected," the warden stammered, his face pale with shock. "That's the point, Warden Konate," President Traoré replied calmly. "I need to see prisoner Hassan Diallo immediately." The warden's expression shifted. "Hassan Diallo? But sir, he's just a common criminal. Perhaps you'd prefer to see our facilities first." "I've come specifically for Diallo," the president cut him off. "Take me to him now." As they walked through the prison corridors, inmates pressed against cell bars, whispering in disbelief at the president's presence. The concrete walls were damp, the air heavy with the smell of sweat and disinfectant. "How long have you been warden here?" President Traoré asked casually. 3 years, Mr. President." "So Diallo was imprisoned before your time?" The warden nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "Yes, sir. 4 years before I arrived." They turned down a darker corridor where the cells were smaller and more isolated. The president noted how the conditions worsened the deeper they went into the facility. "Here we are," the warden announced, stopping at a cell near the end. Inside, a thin man sat on a narrow bed, head bowed. When the cell door opened, he didn't look up, as if visitors were so rare he hadn't registered the sound. "Hassan Diallo," the president said. The prisoner raised his head slowly, his eyes widening when he recognized his visitor. He tried to stand but stumbled, weak from years of confinement. "Mr. President," he whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. President Traoré turned to his security team and the warden. "Leave us, sir. Protocol dictates," the warden began. "Wait outside," the president ordered firmly. When they were alone, President Traoré sat on the small stool in the corner of the cell. "Your wife wrote to me," he said simply. Hassan's eyes filled with tears. "Fatima is still fighting for me. She believes you're innocent of the bank robbery that put you here." "I am innocent," Hassan said, a flicker of life returning to his face. "I was working at the hospital when it happened. There were witnesses, but no one would listen." The president pulled out a notebook. "Tell me everything, every detail you remember about that day, the trial, everything." As Hassan spoke, the president felt increasingly disturbed. The man described a rushed trial, evidence that disappeared, witnesses who were never called, and a public defender who slept through critical testimony. After 15 minutes, the president's security chief knocked on the door. "Time, Mr. President." President Traoré stood. "I've heard enough for now, Hassan. I make you no promises, but I will look into this personally." "Thank you," Hassan whispered, a dangerous spark of hope lighting his eyes for the first time in 7 years. As they left the prison, the president turned to his chief of staff. "I want the complete file on Hassan Diallo's case on my desk tonight, and find me the prosecutor who handled it." "What was his name?" "Marcel Touré," his chief of staff replied, already making notes. He's a judge now. The president's expression hardened. Even more interesting. Get me everything. In the car, President Traoré stared out the window, his mind racing. The warden's nervousness, the hastily hidden files he'd glimpsed in the office, and the raw conviction in Hassan's eyes told him there was more to this story, much more. Sir, his security chief ventured, pursuing this personally could be politically dangerous. Justice isn't about politics, the president replied firmly. And a president who ignores injustice is no leader at all. As the convoy pulled away from Mako prison, President Traoré knew he had just started something that would either right a terrible wrong or create powerful enemies. Either way, there was no turning back now. The next morning, President Traoré arrived at his office earlier than usual. The stack of files his staff had gathered overnight sat on his desk. Police reports, trial transcripts, and witness statements from Hassan Diallo's case. As he read, his concern deepened. The evidence against Hassan was flimsy at best. Security camera footage from the bank was grainy and inconclusive. The only witness who identified Hassan had later recanted, claiming police pressure, but this statement was buried in a supplementary report. Most troubling was the timeline. According to hospital records, Hassan had been working his shift as a janitor at the time of the robbery. Yet these records were never presented at trial. The president called in his most trusted advisor, Justice Minister Kofi Mensah. What do you make of this? President Traoré pushed the files across his desk. Minister Mensah skimmed the documents, his frown growing deeper. This case should never have resulted in a conviction. The evidence doesn't support it. That's what I thought, the president said. And now the prosecutor who pushed this case through is Judge Marcel Traoré. Traoré, Mensah repeated, his expression darkening. He's well connected. His brother-in-law is General Keita, the same General Keita who opposed my election, President Traoré noted. Minister Mensah nodded slowly. This could be complicated, sir. Justice often is, the president replied. I want you to find Hassan's original defense attorney, and the hospital administrator who would have had the work records. And Judge Traoré, not yet. First we gather evidence. After Mensah left, President Traoré received an unexpected visitor, Warden Konate from Mako prison. Mr. President, forgive the intrusion, the warden said nervously, but after your visit yesterday, I felt I needed to speak with you directly. Go on. The president encouraged, studying the man carefully. When I took over the prison 3 years ago, I found certain irregularities in some case files, including Diallo's. The warden pulled a flash drive from his pocket. This contains security footage from the hospital where Diallo worked. It shows him mopping floors during the bank robbery. This evidence was never submitted to the court. President Traoré accepted the drive. Why are you bringing this to me now? Because I've tried through proper channels. Each time the files disappear, or authorities lose interest. The warden wiped sweat from his forehead. Last month I received a warning to stop asking questions. My family received threats. From whom? I don't know for certain. But the day after I inquired about Diallo's case with the Justice Department, Judge Traoré invited me to lunch. The president leaned forward. What did he want? He didn't say anything directly, just mentioned how fortunate I was to have such a secure position, how my children were doing well in their exclusive schools I could never afford on my salary alone. He was reminding you of what you could lose, the president concluded. The warden nodded miserably. I've been accepting small payments to look the other way on prison conditions. Nothing major, but enough to compromise me. Enough to keep me silent about cases like Diallo's. Why risk coming forward now? Because seeing you with Diallo yesterday, it was the first time I felt someone powerful enough might actually help him. After the warden left, President Traoré viewed the footage. It clearly showed Hassan Diallo working at the hospital exactly as he claimed. He called Minister Mensah back to his office. We need to move faster, he said, showing him the video. Hassan Diallo is innocent, and people have gone to great lengths to keep him imprisoned. But why? Mensah asked. He's nobody important. That's what we need to find out, the president replied. I want to know who was actually behind that bank robbery, and what they were really after. By evening, more pieces had fallen into place. The bank manager from the robbery had suddenly received a promotion and moved abroad. The lead detective had retired early with an unusually generous pension. And most telling, the bank's vault had contained sensitive documents belonging to several high-ranking officials, documents that disappeared during the robbery. President Traoré stared out his office window at the darkening sky. They needed a scapegoat, he said quietly, and Hassan Diallo was convenient. Sir Minister Mensah warned, pursuing this will make powerful people very uncomfortable. Good, the president replied. Comfort breeds complacency, and justice has been asleep too long in this case. As he prepared to leave for the night, his security chief handed him a note. It contained just 4 words. Leave Diallo alone. The president crumpled the paper. Have the car ready tomorrow morning. We're going back to Mako prison. Before returning to the prison, President Traoré decided to confront Judge Marcel Touré directly. The judge's chambers were located in the Supreme Court building, an imposing colonial structure in the heart of the capital. President Traoré arrived unannounced, accompanied only by his most trusted security officer. The surprise on the judge's secretary's face was evident. Mr. President, Judge Touré is in a meeting, but I'll wait, President Traoré said, taking a seat in the reception area. 15 minutes later, Judge Touré emerged from his office, escorting out a wealthy businessman known for government contracts. The judge froze when he saw the president. Mr. President, this is unexpected, Touré said smoothly, quickly regaining his composure. Please come in. Inside the opulent chambers, President Traoré declined the offered seat. I prefer to stand, Judge. This won't take long. How can I help our esteemed leader? Touré asked, his smile not reaching his eyes. Hassan Diallo, the president said simply, watching the judge's reaction. A slight twitch of the eye was the only indication that the name meant anything to him. I'm afraid I handle hundreds of cases, Mr. President. I can't recall every name. Strange, since this was one of your most prominent prosecutions before you became a judge. The bank robbery 7 years ago. Ah yes. Touré nodded slowly. A clear-cut case, as I recall. President Traoré placed a folder on the desk. Clear-cut. Then perhaps you can explain why the key evidence proving Diallo's innocence never made it to court. Touré didn't touch the folder. Evidence is only admissible if properly submitted, Mr. President. As you know, our judicial system has strict procedures. Procedures that seem to have been manipulated, the president countered. Hospital security footage showing Diallo at work during the robbery mysteriously disappeared. Witnesses changed their statements. Why? You're making serious accusations, Touré said coldly. Based on what? The complaints of a convicted criminal. Based on evidence that's been suppressed for 7 years. President Traoré leaned forward. I'm reopening the investigation, Judge Touré. And I'm starting with the question of why an innocent man was framed. For a moment fear flashed across Touré's face before he controlled it. With all due respect, Mr. President, this is highly irregular. There are proper channels. Channels that have failed Hassan Diallo for 7 years, the president interrupted. I've seen enough to convince me that justice was not served. Be careful, Mr. President, Touré said quietly. Some cases are better left closed. Is that a threat, Judge? Merely advice from someone who understands the complexities of our legal system and our politics. President Traoré moved toward the door. I didn't seek this office to ignore injustice when I find it. The investigation reopens today. As he left the building, his security officer leaned closer. Sir, he made a call immediately after we left his office. Good, the president nodded. The game begins. Back in his office, President Traoré met with a small trusted team. Justice Minister Mensah, his personal security chief, and the new Attorney General, Aminata Sow. Judge Traoré is definitely involved, the president explained. But he's not acting alone. Attorney General So reviewed the files. The bank robbery targeted specific documents more than money. Records show that 2 million went missing, but the vault held over 10 million. What were in those documents? President Traoré asked. Minister Mensah cleared his throat. We believe they contained evidence of a massive land grab scheme from 7 years ago. Government officials were selling protected forest reserves to foreign mining companies. And how does Hassan Diallo connect to this? He doesn't, Attorney General So replied. That's the point. He was the perfect scapegoat. No political connections, no resources to fight back. Someone needs to talk to the bank manager, who conveniently moved abroad, the president suggested. Already done, sir, his security chief reported. He died in a car accident 3 years ago. The room fell silent as they absorbed the implications. We're dealing with people willing to kill to keep this buried, President Traoré said finally. We need to move Hassan Diallo to protective custody immediately. As they prepared to leave for the prison, the president received an urgent call. The warden's voice was panicked. Mr. President, there's a situation. Hassan Diallo has been taken to the prison hospital. He's been stabbed in a fight. We're on our way, President Traoré said, grabbing his coat. Keep him alive, warden. In the car, the president's mind raced. The timing was too convenient. Judge Touré's call had set this in motion. They were trying to silence Hassan before the truth could come out. Drive faster, he ordered his security team. We might already be too late. President Traoré's convoy screamed toward Mako prison, sirens blaring. He had already called ahead for the prison doctor to send updates every 5 minutes on Hassan Diallo's condition. Stab wound to the abdomen, the security chief reported after receiving a message. He's lost a lot of blood. Who attacked him? The president demanded. A prisoner named Bakary Kone. Claims it was over a personal dispute. President Traoré shook his head. Too convenient. Check Kone's connections. As they approached the prison, the president noticed unusual activity. Guards running along the perimeter, lookouts posted at corners. Something wasn't right. Stop the car, he ordered suddenly. His security team looked alarmed. Stop now. When the vehicle halted 100 meters from the prison gate, President Traoré pointed to the guard tower. That's not the regular guard. And those men by the entrance, those aren't prison uniforms. His security chief focused binoculars on the figures. You're right, sir. Those are military uniforms. Special forces. Minister Mensah, who had joined them, looked worried. General Keita's men. Judge Touré's brother-in-law. They're here for Hassan, President Traoré realized. Or to destroy evidence. The president quickly formulated a plan. He couldn't use an official channel. The prison's communications might be compromised. Instead, he called the warden's personal cell phone. Warden Konate, listen carefully. Where exactly is Hassan Diallo right now? Prison hospital, East Wing, the warden whispered. But there are soldiers here claiming to have orders to transfer him. Those orders are fraudulent. I need you to move him immediately. Is there another exit from the hospital wing? A service entrance for medical deliveries. But the soldiers create a diversion. Tell them I've ordered Hassan moved to the central hospital in the city. Meanwhile, have your most trusted guards take him out the service entrance. The president turned to his team. We need an unmarked vehicle at the east service entrance in 5 minutes. His security chief nodded and dispatched 2 agents with a plain car. Meanwhile, President Traoré called Attorney General So. I need an immediate warrant for Judge Marcel Touré's arrest and authorization to confiscate all his records. On what charges? She asked. Obstruction of justice, corruption, conspiracy to commit murder, and we'll add more as we find evidence. I also need military police. I can trust to arrest General Keita's men currently impersonating prison guards. As they waited for their agents to reach the service entrance, President Traoré received word that the diversion was working. Warden Konate had announced that Hassan was being prepared for transfer to the central hospital, drawing the imposter guards to the main entrance. "Our people are at the service door," his security chief confirmed. "But we have another problem. General Kita himself just arrived at the prison." The president's jaw tightened. "He's here to ensure Hassan doesn't leave alive." The next 15 minutes were the longest of President Traoré's life. Finally, his security chief received confirmation. "They have Hassan. He's weak but stable. They're bringing him now." When the unmarked car approached, President Traoré saw Hassan lying across the back seat, pale and bandaged. A prison doctor sat beside him, monitoring his condition. "Get him to military hospital," the president ordered. "Not the central hospital. They'll look for him there. And post our most trusted guards." As Hassan was transferred to the president's armored vehicle, his eyes fluttered open. "Mr. President," he whispered, "why would you risk this for me?" "Because justice isn't a privilege, Hassan. It's a right, and it's been denied to you for far too long." Once Hassan was safely on his way to the military hospital, President Traoré turned his attention back to the prison. "Now we deal with General Kita." Instead of avoiding confrontation, the president ordered his convoy directly to the main entrance. When the gates opened, he stepped out alone, facing the general who stood surrounded by his men. "General Kita," President Traoré called out, his voice carrying across the prison yard. "Would you explain why your men are interfering with prison operations without authorization?" The general stepped forward, his expression cold. "National security concerns, Mr. President, concerning one prisoner, Hassan Diallo, a man convicted of bank robbery." "I'm not at liberty to discuss details," Kita replied, stiffly. "Then perhaps we should discuss them at headquarters," the president suggested. In front of the Joint Chiefs, for a tense moment, it seemed the general might refuse. Then, seeing the president's official guards taking positions, he nodded curtly. "Of course, Mr. President." As they walked back to their vehicles, President Traoré's security chief whispered, "Hassan is safely at the military hospital. Attorney General So has secured the warrant for Judge Touré." "Good," the president replied quietly. "Now we need to find what was in those stolen documents before anyone else can destroy the evidence." Back in his office, later that night, President Traoré received the first pieces of recovered evidence, fragments of documents found in Judge Touré's private safe, and records of offshore accounts showing millions transferred to both Touré and General Kita shortly after Hassan's conviction. The president looked at his tired team. "We're getting closer, but Hassan still isn't safe, and neither is the truth." While Hassan Diallo recovered under guard at the military hospital, President Traoré turned his attention to finding evidence that would conclusively prove Hassan's innocence and expose the real culprits. "We need the complete picture," he told his team as they gathered in a secure room at the presidential palace. "Someone knows exactly what happened 7 years ago." Justice Minister Mensah slid a photo across the table. "We found this in Judge Touré's hidden files. This woman might be our key." The photo showed a young bank teller. According to the attached note, her name was Aisha Kamara. She had been working at the bank during the robbery, but disappeared immediately afterward. "Find her," President Traoré ordered. The search led them to a small coastal village, 300 kilometers from the capital. According to local records, a woman matching Aisha's description had arrived there 7 years ago, changing her name to Marie Kone. President Traoré decided to meet her personally, traveling with a small security detail in unmarked vehicles. They found her teaching at a local school, living a quiet life far from the capital. When the president walked into her classroom, after the children had left, she dropped her chalk, her face draining of color. "I knew someday someone would come," she said quietly. "I'm not here to harm you, Miss Kamara," President Traoré assured her. "I'm trying to free an innocent man." "Hassan Diallo," she nodded, surprising him with her immediate recognition of the name. I've lived with the guilt every day. Over the next hour, Aisha revealed the truth. The bank robbery had been orchestrated by high-ranking officials to retrieve incriminating documents about illegal land deals. When the robbery didn't go as planned, a security guard was killed, drawing unwanted attention. They needed a scapegoat. They showed me Hassan's photo and told me to identify him, Aisha explained, tears streaming down her face. When I refused, they threatened my family. Then they offered me money to leave and stay quiet. Did you see who was actually behind the robbery? President Traoré asked. Aisha nodded slowly. It wasn't just Judge Traoré and General Keita. They were working for someone higher. Who? She reached into a hidden compartment in her desk and pulled out a small flash drive. I didn't just leave. I made copies of what I saw that day. Security footage they didn't know existed, showing who came to retrieve the stolen documents after the robbery. The president accepted the drive. Will you testify to what you know? Will I be protected? She asked, fearfully. You have my word, he promised. Back in the capital, President Traoré and his team viewed the footage. It showed General Keita entering the bank's vault area hours after the robbery, accompanied by a shadowy figure whose face was mostly hidden from the camera. Can we enhance this? The president asked, leaning forward. The technical expert worked on the image, gradually clarifying the second man's features. When the face became clear, Minister Mensah gasped. That's former Vice President Ouedraogo, the same man who nearly became president instead of you. Attorney General Saul added. The pieces suddenly fit together. If Ouedraogo had won the election instead of Traoré, the corruption would have continued unchecked. Hassan Diallo would have remained in prison forever, a forgotten victim of political convenience. We need to move quickly, President Traoré decided. Ouedraogo still has powerful allies. That night, as the president finalized plans to arrest the former vice president, he received an urgent call from the military hospital. Mr. President, the doctor's voice was tense. Someone tried to get to Hassan Diallo, a nurse we don't recognize. When security confronted him, he escaped. Increase security, the president ordered. I'm coming there now. At the hospital, President Traoré found Hassan awake but frightened. They won't stop, will they? Hassan asked weakly. Not until we expose the whole truth, the president admitted. But you're not alone anymore. He showed Hassan the evidence they'd gathered, the security footage, Aisha's testimony, the financial records linking Traoré, Keita, and former Vice President Ouedraogo to the frame-up. Why are you doing this? Hassan asked. Standing against such powerful people for someone like me. President Traoré sat beside the hospital bed. Because before I was president, I was a lawyer. I saw too many people like you, ordinary citizens crushed by a system that favors the powerful. When I took office, I swore that would change. He paused, and because 7 years ago, I defended a man just like you. I lost that case because evidence disappeared. I never found out who was behind it. What happened to him? Hassan asked. He died in prison, President Traoré said quietly. I couldn't save him, but I can save you. As Hassan processed this revelation, an explosion rocked the hospital floor. The president's security team rushed in, weapons drawn. The north stairwell's been breached, the security chief reported. Armed men are coming up. President Traoré made an instant decision. Get Hassan out through the service elevator. I'll draw their attention. Mr. President, that's too dangerous, his security chief protested. Do it, the president insisted. Hassan is the key witness now. Without him, we have no case. As his security team rushed Hassan away, President Traoré prepared to face whoever was coming up those stairs, and to finally confront the corruption that had poisoned his country for too long. As the sound of gunfire echoed through the hospital corridors, President Traoré's security team rushed him into a side room.
"Sir, we need to get you out immediately," his chief security officer insisted. "Not until I know Hassan is safe," the president replied firmly. Through the chaos of their earpieces, they received confirmation that Hassan had been successfully evacuated from the hospital. He was now in a secure convoy heading to a safe house outside the city. The attackers, President Traoré asked. "Military special forces," but not responding to official channels, the security chief reported. "They're wearing unmarked uniforms." "Ouedraogo's private force," the president concluded. "He's getting desperate." Instead of fleeing, President Traoré made an unexpected decision. He instructed his security team to set up an immediate broadcast from the hospital, a direct address to the nation. "Sir, this location isn't secure," his chief of staff protested. "Exactly," the president nodded. "The people need to see what's happening. They need to witness the lengths some will go to hide the truth." Minutes later, as his team secured the necessary equipment, President Traoré stood before the camera. Behind him, the sounds of the ongoing security situation were clearly audible, creating exactly the dramatic backdrop he needed. "My fellow citizens," he began, his voice steady despite the chaos, "I speak to you from Military Hospital, where moments ago, armed men attempted to assassinate a key witness in a case of grave injustice. 7 years ago, an innocent man named Hassan Diallo was wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he did not commit." As he spoke, images appeared on the screen, the evidence they had gathered, Hassan's hospital records, and the security footage showing former Vice President Ouedraogo at the bank after the robbery. "These men weren't just covering up a bank robbery," the president continued. "They were hiding corruption at the highest levels of government, illegal land deals that destroyed protected forests and displaced thousands of families." In homes and businesses across the nation, citizens watched transfixed as their president, surrounded by armed security in a hospital under attack, exposed a conspiracy reaching to the highest levels of power. "I call on former Vice President Ouedraogo to surrender himself immediately," President Traoré declared. "And I promise every citizen of our nation, no one is above the law. Not generals, not judges, not former vice presidents, and no one is beneath its protection, not even prisoners forgotten in our jails." As he concluded his address, military police loyal to the president stormed the hospital, arresting the remaining attackers. Among them was one of General Keita's top lieutenants, caught with direct orders from the former vice president.
The broadcast had another immediate effect. Citizens began gathering outside the hospital, then at government buildings across the capital. What had been a private battle for justice was now a public demand. At the safe house, Hassan Diallo watched the president's broadcast on a small television, tears streaming down his face. For 7 years he had been a nameless prisoner. Now his story was galvanizing an entire nation. "Will it be enough?" he asked. The security officer guarding him. "The president doesn't start fights. He can't win," the officer replied. Throughout the night, developments came rapidly. General Keita was arrested at the airport trying to flee the country. Judge Touré surrendered himself to authorities, but former Vice President Ouedraogo remained at large. In the presidential palace, President Traoré received updates while planning his next move. "The public is with you, Mr. President," Justice Minister Mensah reported. "Demonstrations supporting your actions are happening in every major city. And Ouedraogo, still hidden. But we've frozen his accounts and secured his known properties." The president nodded thoughtfully. "He'll contact me directly. He has no other option now." As if on cue, his private phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. "You've made a serious mistake." Ouedraogo's voice came through clearly. "Do you think exposing this will make the country better? There are realities of governance you still don't understand." "I understand the difference between governance and corruption," President Traoré replied calmly. "One builds a nation, the other destroys it." "You're naive," Ouedraogo sneered. But I'm willing to negotiate. Call off the search, let Keita and Touré go, and I can offer you something valuable. What could you possibly offer me? Evidence of corruption against your own ministers. Even in your administration, there are those taking bribes, selling influence. President Traoré paused, considering. You're offering to trade corruption for corruption. I'm offering reality, Uderogo countered. No government is clean. Use the evidence I have to strengthen your position. In return, this Diallo matter goes away. And Hassan, the man who lost 7 years of his life, a generous settlement. He can live comfortably, quietly. The president's grip tightened on the phone. That's your mistake, thinking justice can be bought and sold. Hassan Diallo doesn't want money. He wants his name cleared. He wants the truth. Truth is a luxury, Mr. President. No, it's a necessity. And you've hidden from it long enough. President Traoré signaled to his security team, who had been tracing the call. They gave him a thumbs up. They had Uderogo's location. This conversation is over, the president said firmly. But justice is just beginning. Within the hour, former Vice President Uderogo was in custody, and with him, files that implicated dozens of officials in the corrupt land scheme that had led to Hassan's imprisonment. As dawn broke over the capital, President Traoré returned to the safe house where Hassan was being protected. He found the former prisoner standing at the window, watching the sunrise, his first glimpse of morning light without prison bars in 7 years. It's over, the president told him. Uderogo has been arrested. We have all the evidence we need. Hassan turned, his eyes bright with unshed tears. What happens now? Now. President Traoré said, placing a hand on his shoulder, we make it official. 3 days later, the Supreme Court convened an emergency session. The courtroom was packed with journalists, citizens, and international observers. At the center of attention sat Hassan Diallo, still thin from his years in prison, his eyes wide as he took in the proceedings. President Traoré had chosen not to attend, feeling his presence might politicize what should be a purely judicial matter. Instead, he watched the live broadcast from his office, alongside Justice Minister Mensah. The acting Chief Justice, replacing the now-arrested Judge Touré, reviewed the new evidence methodically. The security footage showing Hassan at the hospital during the robbery, Aisha Kamara's testimony about being coerced to identify him, and the financial records showing payments to officials involved in the frame-up. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, the Chief Justice announced, this court finds that Hassan Diallo was wrongfully convicted. His conviction is hereby overturned, and his record expunged completely. The courtroom erupted in applause. On the television screen, President Traoré watched as Hassan buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with emotion. A good day for justice, Minister Mensah observed. Just the beginning, the president replied. Later that afternoon, President Traoré welcomed Hassan to the presidential palace. The newly freed man walked tentatively into the grand reception room, still unaccustomed to open spaces after his years of confinement. Mr. President, Hassan began, his voice breaking slightly. How can I ever thank you? You don't need to thank